A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
My Weird Prompts is a community-driven initiative exploring how AI can fuel curiosity and uncover the fascinating ways our world works. GPU compute for this podcast is generously provided by Modal. Learn more at modal.com.
You ever look at a hard drive and feel a sense of impending doom? Not because it is failing, but because of what is on it.
Every single day of my life, corn. My name is Herman Poppleberry, and I am a chronic hoarder of high bitrate data that I am convinced will be important someday. I have stacks of silver enclosures on my desk that contain the ghosts of projects I never finished.
It is that digital landfill feeling. You have 50 terabytes of beautiful 4K footage, some drone shots, some really intimate interviews, but it is just sitting there. Today's prompt from Daniel is about that specific weight. He is asking about the transition from short-form videography, the stuff with the quick cuts and the branded aesthetic, to the actual long-form documentary. Specifically for people who have the passion, but feel like they are staring at a mountain they cannot possibly climb without a production budget or a year of free time.
It is the videographer's plateau. You get really good at the 3-minute edit. You can churn out a corporate testimonial or a travel reel in a weekend. But when you look at a 60-minute timeline, the math just stops making sense. The cognitive load of managing that much narrative architecture is fundamentally different from just stringing together pretty shots. It is like the difference between building a really nice garden shed and trying to design a cathedral. The materials might be the same, but the physics of the structure are completely different.
And there is a psychological wall there too. If you are a professional videographer, your time has a dollar value. You know that if you spend 500 hours on a passion project that might never make a cent, you are essentially paying for that documentary with your own potential earnings. It is a massive sunk cost before you even hit the export button. We are living in a creator economy that demands constant output. If you stop posting for 3 months to edit a feature, the algorithm treats you like you have died.
I think we need to start by redefining what a documentary actually is in the modern context. People see the word documentary and they think of a 10-part series on Netflix with $1 million archival budget. But at its core, a documentary is just narrative architecture applied to reality. It is moving from being a technician who captures moments to an author who structures truth. The leap into the void isn't about the length of the video, it is about the depth of the commitment to a single story.
That is a big jump though. In short form, the edit often hides the lack of a story. You can use a fast transition or a heavy color grade to mask the fact that nothing is actually being said. You can lean on a trending audio track to do the emotional heavy lifting for you. In a 60-minute film, you cannot hide. The sincerity threshold is much higher. We talked about this in episode 11171 regarding movie flops, but it applies here too. If you are not being sincere with the material, the audience feels the drag by minute 15. They can sense when you are just filling time because you didn't have a clear narrative goal.
The drag is real, and the technical debt is what usually kills these projects before the sincerity even has a chance to fail. If you are moving from a 3-minute project to a 60-minute one, your media management needs to scale by a factor of 20. You cannot just remember where that one clip is anymore. You need a system. If you have 50 hours of raw footage, that is 3,000 minutes of media. If you spend even 10 seconds looking for a specific clip, and you do that 1,000 times, you have lost hours of your life just navigating your own folders.
I remember back in episode 589, we talked about taming the chaos of large media assets. For a documentarian, that is not just a nice-to-have skill, it is the entire job for the first 6 months. If you do not have a robust metadata strategy, you are just digging through a landfill with a spoon. You have to move from the technical storage issues to the narrative structure, but you can't do that if you're drowning in unorganized files.
And let us be honest about the tools. The January 2026 updates to Adobe Premiere and DaVinci Resolve have actually changed the game for the solo creator. The AI-assisted transcription and scene detection are finally at a point where they can act as a junior assistant editor. The new semantic search features allow you to search your footage for man wearing a red hat looking sad and actually find it across 40 hours of raw files. That lowers the barrier to entry significantly. It means the technical debt of logging footage is being subsidized by the GPU, but it does not solve the time problem. It just changes where you spend that time.
The time problem is usually a prioritization problem in disguise, though, right? Or maybe it is a fear of the non-commercial aspect. If I spend my weekends making a film about a local craftsman that nobody might watch, am I wasting my life? We are so conditioned to think about return on investment that we forget about return on experience.
I would argue it is the opposite. In the current creator economy, everything is disposable. You make a reel, it peaks in 48 hours, and then it is buried by the algorithm. A documentary is a legacy asset. It is a research and development investment in your own creative soul. Even if it does not make a cent today, it changes how you think about every project you do afterward. It is a signal to the world that you are capable of sustained thought. That has a market value that is hard to quantify but very real.
It is a shift from being a content creator to being a filmmaker. But let us get into the weeds of that technical debt you mentioned. If I have 50 hours of footage for a 1-hour film, how do I actually start without losing my mind? Let's pivot from the how of the storage to the why of the storytelling.
You start with proxies and you start with the spine. If you try to edit a documentary in full resolution on a standard workstation, you are going to spend half your time waiting for the playhead to move. You need a low-resolution workflow so the technology disappears, but more importantly, you need a metadata strategy. Every single clip needs to be tagged not just by what is in it, but by the emotional beat it represents. Is this clip conflict, resolution, or atmosphere?
That sounds like a lot of front-loaded work. Most videographers want to just start cutting. They want to see the pretty pictures moving to the music immediately.
And that is why they fail. They try to find the story in the edit without having a map. If you do not have an outline before you touch the timeline, you are just wandering in the woods. You need to know what the one central question of your film is. If the film is about a local baker, the question isn't, how do you make bread? The question might be, why does this man stay in a dying neighborhood to bake for people who are leaving? Once you have that question, every clip is either an answer or a distraction. If it is a distraction, it doesn't matter how beautiful the lighting is, it has to go.
It reminds me of what we discussed in episode 1179 about writing for children. You have to take these incredibly complex, messy realities and distill them down into something that has a clear, structural integrity. When you write for a child, you can't hide behind jargon or complex subplots. You have to find the core truth. Documentary is the same. You are taking 50 hours of messy, contradictory human life and distilling it into 60 minutes of clarity. You are not losing the nuance. You are just organizing it so it doesn't overwhelm the viewer.
There is also this misconception that you need a big story to justify the long-form format. Some of the most profound documentaries are hyper-local. They are about things that seem mundane but are explored with such depth that they become universal. The time investment allows for a level of intimacy that short form simply cannot achieve. You cannot get someone to truly open up to a camera in a 10-minute window. You need the hours of sitting there, the awkward silences, the moments where they forget the lens is even there. That is where the human texture comes from.
Let's talk about that texture. With the new AI upscaling tools that dropped in early 2026, people attempted to make old 16mm film or shaky phone footage look like it was shot on an Arri Alexa yesterday. But you lose the soul of the footage when you do that. The Ken Burns effect worked because it respected the stillness and the imperfection of the image. Modern documentarians need to learn when to let the technology help and when to tell the technology to get out of the way. If you smooth out every wrinkle and denoise every shadow, you are removing the evidence of reality.
We see this in the sincerity threshold discussion. Audiences can feel when a film has been over-processed. They want to see the thumbprint of the creator. They want to feel the struggle of the filmmaking process. If it looks too much like a high-budget commercial, they stop trusting the narrative. They start looking for the brand behind the message.
But how do you handle the sunk cost feeling when you are 6 months in and you have nothing but a messy rough cut? That is where most people quit. They look at the work they have done, they look at their bank account, and they think, I could have made $10,000 doing corporate headshots in the time I spent on this. The average documentary takes 18 to 24 months to complete. That is a long time to go without a paycheck for your passion.
You have to view it as a portfolio shift. If you want to be known as a high-end director, you need a calling card that shows you can handle a complex narrative. A documentary is a proof of concept for your brain. It shows you can manage a massive project from conception to delivery. That has a market value that far exceeds the immediate payout of a single gig. Think of it as your creative R&D department. Every major corporation spends money on research that might not lead to a product for years. You are a creative corporation. You need to fund your own research.
I love the idea of the accidental documentary as a way to bridge this gap. Sometimes you set out to make a 5-minute piece, and you realize during the interview that there is a much bigger story there. I read about a videographer who went to film a simple how-to video for a local bike shop. He ended up spending 2 years filming the owner because he realized the shop was the last remaining social hub for a disappearing immigrant community. He didn't start with a documentary budget. He started with a single afternoon and the bravery to follow the thread when it got inconvenient.
The inconvenience is where the value lives. If it were easy, everyone would have a feature film on their resume. The technical cost of non-commercial work is high, but the cost of not doing it is higher. You end up as a technician who just executes other people's visions. Documentary making is how you claim your own vision, but you have to be smart about it. You can't just burn out.
So, if someone is listening to this and they have that digital landfill on their desk right now, what is the actual move? Do they just block out a month of their life and go dark?
No, that is a recipe for burnout and divorce. You apply the 10-minute rule. You commit to 10 minutes of work on the project every single day. Not an hour, not a weekend, 10 minutes. Because 10 minutes is enough to open the project file, let the media relink, and look at one scene. Usually, once the file is open and the friction of starting is gone, you will stay for an hour, but the goal is just 10 minutes. It keeps the project alive in your subconscious. If you go a week without touching it, the project starts to feel like a chore. It becomes a ghost that haunts your office. If you touch it every day, it stays a passion.
I like that. It prevents the project from becoming a someday project. And you have to be okay with the spine changing. You mentioned that you cannot find the story in the edit, but you can certainly refine it. Does that mean you should have a full script before you start?
Not a script in the traditional sense, because reality doesn't follow a script. But you need a structural outline. You need to know your inciting incident, your midpoint shift, and your resolution. Even if you are filming a birdwatching club, there has to be a narrative arc. Maybe the inciting incident is the arrival of a rare species. The midpoint is the conflict between the members over how to protect it. The resolution is what that bird taught them about their own community. If you don't have those beats in your head, you are just filming people with binoculars. You are collecting data, not telling a story.
And that connects back to the storage issue. If you know your beats, you know what footage to keep and what to bury. You can't keep everything in your active memory. You have to be ruthless. The sunk cost of creative labor often makes us want to include a shot just because it was hard to get. I woke up at 4 in the morning for this drone shot, so it has to be in the movie. No, it doesn't. If it doesn't move the story forward, it belongs in the landfill. This is the killing your darlings phase, and it is much harder when the film is 60 minutes long.
That is the hardest lesson for any videographer. In a 3-minute edit, every shot is a darling. You only have 60 shots, so they all feel precious. In a 60-minute edit, 90% of your footage is just scaffolding. You use it to build the house, you use it to understand the characters, but you have to take the scaffolding down before the guests arrive. If you leave the scaffolding up, the audience can't see the house.
I think we should also touch on the information radiator aspect of this. We talked about those in episode 649. A documentary is a massive high-bandwidth radiator of your interests and your capabilities. When you are doing a deep dive into a subject, you are becoming an expert in that niche. That expertise often leads to other opportunities. You might start a documentary about sustainable farming and end up being the go-to consultant for agricultural tech companies because you have spent 200 hours talking to farmers and understanding their pain points. The film is the output, but the knowledge is the real asset.
It signals to the world what you care about and how deeply you are willing to look at a problem. In 2026, depth is the rarest commodity. Everyone is skimming the surface. If you are the person who went deep, you are the person people want to hire for the big, complex jobs.
So, the takeaways here are pretty clear, but they require a lot of discipline. First, stop treating it like a video project and start treating it like narrative architecture. Get your metadata in order before you start cutting. Use the AI tools from the January 2026 updates to handle the grunt work of transcription and scene detection, but don't let them make the creative choices.
And prioritize the spine. Identify the one question your film is answering. If you can't state it in one sentence, you aren't ready to edit. And please, for the love of all that is holy, use a proxy workflow. Your sanity is worth more than the disk space those low-res files take up. If the technology is frustrating you, you will find any excuse to stop working on the project. Make the technology invisible.
I would add one more. Repurpose your failures. If you have hours of footage that didn't make the cut for the long-form film, that stuff is gold for social media. You can create a dozen high-value short clips that drive eyes toward the main project. It makes the sunk cost feel a lot less heavy when every piece of media is working for you in some way. You can maintain your creator economy presence while working on your legacy assets simultaneously.
It is all about momentum. The documentary is a marathon, but you run it one 10-minute rule at a time. And when you finally hit that export button on a 60-minute film that you actually believe in, there is no feeling like it. It is a level of professional satisfaction that 1,000 likes on a reel can never touch. You have contributed something to the permanent record of humanity.
It is the difference between building a sandcastle and building a cathedral. One is fun for a day, the other stands for a lifetime. If you have the passion and the focus, the time is something you find, not something you are given. If you don't make the film, the story remains trapped in the hard drive, and eventually that drive will fail. The only way to save the story is to finish the edit.
Well said. And if people are struggling with the technical side of managing those massive project files, they really should go back and listen to episode 5089. We went deep on the file structures and backup strategies that keep these big projects from turning into a nightmare. You need a beyond Git mindset for media.
This has been a great exploration. I think people often forget that the weird in my weird prompts often leads us back to these very fundamental human desires. The desire to tell a story that lasts. Daniel's prompt really hit on something that I think a lot of creators are feeling right now, that pull towards something more meaningful than the next viral clip.
It is that transition from being a consumer or a creator to being a chronicler of reality. It is a noble pursuit, even if it doesn't make a cent in the first year. The ROI is in the person you become by finishing it.
Thanks as always to our producer Hilbert Flumingtop for keeping the gears turning behind the scenes. And a big thanks to Modal for providing the GPU credits that power the AI side of our production pipeline, especially those semantic search models we were talking about.
This has been My Weird Prompts. If you found this helpful, search for us on Telegram to get notified when new episodes drop. We have a great community of filmmakers and tech nerds there sharing their own digital landfill stories.
Or just head over to myweirdprompts.com to browse the full archive of over 1,200 episodes. There is a lot of gold in there if you are willing to dig.
Catch you in the next one.
See ya.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes to